What's up, DWA fam? This is Asia here to remind you that if you like this podcast, go ahead and hit subscribe, give us a rating, or leave a review. We appreciate y'all listening and hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello.
Hello?
I don't hear myself.
Me neither. There we go.
There we go. Back at it again.
Whoops. You'd think we'd be masters at the roadcaster by now, but we,
No.
learning something new every day.
Takes a while.
Yeah, it's basically May. Well, when this comes out, it will be May, so that's sick. And we're
Hopefully the weather reflects it,
yeah, hopefully. And we're halfway through the year at this point, so
which is wild.
2021 has really come and gone as fast. Well, way faster than 2020. 2020 was slow as fuck.
I got my second shot today.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to feel in a few hours, so
Side effects pending.
this might be the last time you hear from me. Hopefully not.
Please do not break down before this interview, honestly. Anyways, speaking of interview, we have a very exciting guest and topic today. Actually, kind of like a taboo topic, I feel like, low-key.
Yeah. Second Amendment, guns, weapons,
Which
artillery.
we know are, I think we all can agree, an issue in our country.
Of course, there's a lot of issues in the country.
But I'm really excited about our guest because actually he owns a firearms educational course in Boston. His name is Donkor Minors. His company is called the Don Firearms. We'll put all the information in the show notes.
Yeah, you took his class, right?
I took his class to get my LTC, and I literally learned so much. It was nothing that I expected it was going to be, and I went in a little skeptical about if I even wanted an LTC.
That's what happens, and then you go there and you sit through
And
the
you
class.
learn,
And you're like,
yeah.
oh, this is kind of dope.
So, anyways, literally right after the class, I asked if he would be on the podcast. And so, yeah, he came on the podcast, and it's great. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. I think you're going to love it. I feel like we're all going to learn a lot.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Here we go. So we are super excited to welcome Donkor to the podcast today. How are you? How are you doing? We're just so happy to have you here. We have so many questions.
Yeah, man. I'm Blacktastic. Thank you for having me.
I love that.
I'm going to start using that.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you started your company, and sort of what your mission is.
Definitely. I was born in East LA, raised in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and then moved to Roxbury probably in the 90s. So whenever people ask me where I'm from, I have to include that context because I think it matters to me in my narrative. But Roxbury raised, Roxbury homeowner, worked in Roxbury schools for 16 years. I became a firearms owner probably shortly after the Boston bombing for a couple of reasons. One, primarily because I started to kind of see how fast things can shift and change. Some people have forgotten already, but Boston was under real martial law before this Corona stuff, where we had curfew, couldn't move. Folks were going crazy, fighting over things like water. So that really heightened my interest to get my firearms license. And then I became super serious about becoming a firearms instructor because as a former Boston Public School educator, I got tired of seeing young Black and Latino boys die from their interest of wanting to have access to firearms in a way that allowed them to explore that part of their childhood development, but didn't have healthy ways to do it. So they was doing it in the alley, in the project somewhere, emulating what they were seeing in rap videos. And that ended up a lot of the young students that I had, and I was a middle school teacher. So this is really rough because they're still 12, 13, 14 years old. And I just got tired of going to funerals. And I was like, all right, people want to be able to protect themselves, as well as, this is America, right? This country was founded on firearms. It's literally the Second Amendment because it was the second thing that was critical to ensuring that we did not go back under the British tyranny. But sadly, in the hood, young Black and Latino boys just don't have that access, even though in the state of Massachusetts, you can get an FID card at 14 years old in the state, and actually go and shoot on the range on your own. But these are things that, just do not reach our neighborhood. So that was my solution, get them trained up, healthy, responsible ways to engage in firearms, as well as now I'm starting to realize how important it is to get our young people educated in how to stop bleeding, how to use tourniquets, how to plug holes. Because another thing that I started hearing a lot when I was going to a lot of the young men and young women's funerals was that they were like, yo, I wish I could have done something to help my friend, and as a school teacher, I believed that my job was to create solutions, but because of the potential political ramifications in the public school sector, no one was interested in doing that, and I was always ostracized or called a radical for wanting to provide that in the school. So I quit, and I was like, I'm going to do this another way.
Wow.
So,
That's deep.
That's super deep.
Yeah.
And when I learned that fact about you only have to be age 14 when I was in class, like my jaw dropped. I was like, excuse me?
Well, yeah, because in the white community, I mean, you see, like, they come out the womb and they're already playing with guns at the shooting range, doing whatever. But I feel like it's stigmatized that when, like, our community does it, it's looked at a different way.
No doubt. And that's got to stop. We have to begin to normalize it ourselves. We can't look to a media that's already disproportionately representing us to provide another narrative. We have to shift the narratives for ourselves and our community.
I would love to hear your perspective on just even the topic of gun control in the country right now is such a hot topic. And I mean, there's definitely work to be done in the sense of the number of mass shootings that are happening in the United States. But I feel like a lot of people that I talk to about the issue, it's either like you're for guns or you're against guns. And a lot of people aren't really open to the idea of like what you teach in terms of you can own a gun and be safe and know what you're doing for your protection, which was what the Second Amendment was for, without, having to make it this political issue, if that makes sense. So I would just love to hear your perspective on that and, how your work fits into this larger issue that the United States has.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think there's two levels of gun control, right? There's what is done, for white folks, and then there's the gun control that's done for Black folks. And what I'm very particular about, particularly with the population that I work with, which is predominantly Black and Latino families that live in urban neighborhoods, my focus is basically like this. Look, firearm ownership is a part of our liberation and sovereignty. It's a fact. Like there are sisters like Ida B. Wells, who at 16 years old, she traveled the country in the early 1900s, studying which communities experienced lynching in comparison to those that didn't. And what she found out at a very young age was like, yo, look, Black communities that were armed didn't have to worry about the KKK coming through. You feel me?
They got to protect
She's
themselves.
like, if I wish there was more tweets or T-shirts with Ida B. Wells' name on it, but basically Ida B. Wells was like, listen, she was like, they can roll up if they want to, but I got this Winchester rifle in my house, so if I even see a Klansman robe, it's rat-tat-tat-tat, right? Like, you gotta put it in that context for people, because I think sometimes we overthink, the intellectualism that a lot of our elders and ancestors were utilizing. But that's basically what she was saying. She was like, yo, I wish a Klansman would roll up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And she's like, I got something for him. And sadly, her story and her narrative is not one that's included in the Second Amendment conversation for Black people. So I think it's critical for us to recognize that firearm ownership is not new to Black people in America. That it is an integral part of our sovereignty and our freedom in this country as it was built and designed. So I think it's heartbreaking, and I try my very best not to like point fingers and do the bashing stuff, but I have to admit it. I think it's horrible that you have 9 million Black women new gun owners in the United States of America in 2021, and cats are still voting democratically. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand how people can sit here and say they're not coming for your guns when during the Democratic convention, when they were debating topics, they explicitly said that within 90 days, we're coming for your guns. And that's literally what they did. So my thing is like, we have to get to a space where it's not the lesser of two evils. There are other options, right? Like, we have the possibility to exercise our voting differently, even if it's just to make a point, to hold cats accountable. Like, this pandering to the Black community is embarrassing. You know what I'm saying? And I think we have stronger weight and power that we're not flexing correctly yet.
So are you like totally against any type of gun control at all?
I am, because it has huge impacts on the Black community, huge impacts. You know what I mean? Because you have to look at the history of gun control, and there's awesome books on this. Negroes with Guns, um, uh, that nonviolent stuff will get you killed. Just awesome titles that talk about gun control and how it's impacted um, the Black community. I'll give you a primary example. In Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Mm.
right? Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street. One of the first things that they did in Oklahoma was they deputized all of the white men in the city, literally deputized them. So the first thing that they did before they started dropping bombs on Tulsa and Black Wall Street was they actually took the guns out of the homes of the Black people that were in those communities. You look at New Orleans, right? During Hurricane Katrina, one of the first things, and sadly, it was a Black man who was in charge at this time, but one of the first things that they did was they started knocking on doors, all the doors in New Orleans, saying that firearms were actually detrimental in their survival of the hurricane. And what ended up happening was Klansmen, and Spike Lee did a magnificent job in his documentary When the Levees Broke, um, uh, interviewing people who literally said that racist white men were literally driving through Black communities and shooting and killing people that were on their roofs waiting for the National Guard. So my thing is like, I understand. Do I want children dying in schools? Do I want more young people in the hood dying? Hell no. Hell no. But when I used to teach my classes in my living room, and a mother sits in my living room with tears in her face, and I say, "Yo, miss, like, what's wrong? You're in a firearms class, and you're crying," and she breaks down. Her husband gathers her together, and he explains to me that her son had just been murdered, and he was speaking for her at that time. But when we get to the range, she says to me, she says, "I apologize for interrupting the class." And I'm like, "Sis, you don't need to apologize. Like, it's okay." And I said to her, I said, "Well, what's the biggest issue?" And she's like, "Yo, if those punks could kill my son, what's stopping them from coming back to the house and killing the rest of us?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
She's not on the cover of the NRA magazine. No Democratic representatives are coming to have a conversation with this Black mother who's literally saying that without a firearm, there's a possibility that these criminals who murdered my son could also come back and murder us. And she was like, "Nah, I'm taking this ability to protect my children in my own hands." Give you another story. All right, these are real stories that I deal with, and that's why I changed my motto to responsible gun ownership, or 2A, is a healing modality. A father, 72 years old, his son is standing outside of his brother's house over here on H Block, and some kids from Heath Street or one of the rival gangs drive by and start shooting, not necessarily knowing who they shooting at, whatever. Father's holding a gun, hands start shaking. Remember, he's 72 years old. Hands are shaking. I see a single tear fall from his eye. So I say, "Mister, I said, please put the firearm down. Step back. Let's talk. What's going on? And I said, what's up? And he said, I put the gun down 50 years ago because I wanted to be a good Christian and be able to follow, you know, God's way, or he said Jesus's way, right? And he said, never would I have thought that at 72 years old, that my primary job as a father would still be to protect my children. And that's why I'm here trying to pursue my gun license. So these are stories of our people who sadly are in the same predicaments that the Democratic Party and other political figures use to say why guns should be taken off the street. But they're not accounting for all of the other stories of people who are like, no, my job as a parent or my job as a family member or community member is to protect those that I care and I love for. And I think it's unfair to take it away from people.
So yeah, so what do you say to the other side, like the Republicans who, or even the NRA, where there are black people who legally own guns, but they're still killed unjustly, like Philando
I
Castile?
mean,
Like he had a gun
I
on him.
mean,
He was pulled over by a police officer. He had a permit. I think it was an open carry state as well, and the cop still shot him. There was no NRA backing behind him. The NRA didn't really go fight for his cause at all. So
at all.
you see like we're like as our community, like we can go to the left, we can't go to the right. Or do you think that we can favor one side?
I mean, listen, this is broadcasted and this is going to be shared. So I would never tell you my personal opinion, but here's what I will say. In the state of Massachusetts, you owe no police officer. You are not obligated by any law to respond and inform them that you are carrying at the time of being asked. Now, by no means am I going to be immoral and be like, well, you goddamn pig, I know my Second Amendment rights and I ain't got to respond to you. I'm not going to do that. But what I will do is I will say, sir, at this time like this, I am not in possession of a firearm at this time. Right? I think what we cannot do as a community is bind police gun issues with gun issues in totality to the whole collective community. Those are separate issues. Sadly, it's the same weapon that's being used, but without that weapon, right? Does Harriet Tubman, literally walk from Canada to the South 19 times? And the answer to that is no, she does not. You feel what I'm saying? Does, like I said, look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, you look at Ida B. Wells, you look at shit. You could even go with the Puerto Ricans and talk about the Pedro Albizu Campos and Lolita Lebron and all of these different folks who, under Amilcar Cabral for the Cape Verdean community, who literally were like, listen, and Cuba with Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro is actually a huge example because Fidel Castro understood that in order to help all of the Caribbean islands and the African countries to get their independence, that they would have to take up arms. So Fidel got his money up and he dished out guns to the independence for those countries. Now, there's other political and historical elements that also have to be taken into consideration. But the fact of the matter is that you don't get liberation and sovereignty without firearms. So to take out firearms from the equation for melanated communities comes at a huge detriment to the totality of our freedom and liberation.
Yeah, so my question is too, like, so one thing that I heard you say too was like, obviously, do we want children dying in schools? No, da da da. And I think, obviously what we know from mass shootings and the perpetrators of mass shootings, it's normally not people of color.
At all.
So
our people, listen, we have two different issues. Our people shoot up outside the school.
Right.
So they wait until the ops come outside the school and they shoot up. These suckers is going in the school. So it's a different conversation.
So I guess my question to you is like, what if you had to propose a solution to that? Like, now I feel like what you said about the Democratic Party and wanting to remove guns is maybe not the solution, and I agree with that. But I'm just wondering, like, is there, for you, is the solution education, like federal education? Like, what is the What do you feel
Nah.
like is the solution to that if not the argument of the country needs no guns?
The fact of the matter is, if you have laws already that are intended to govern the laws in relationship to guns, to execute those unequivocally across the board.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is cats is being partial. You feel me? You give Tyrone, right, 50 years in prison, right, for a negligent discharge that happens to hit somebody in the foot. I'm just being hypothetical here.
Hmm.
And you give your man Chauvin, you know what I mean, a slap on the wrist, he's probably gonna go to Club Fed, or a couple years, for literally murdering somebody. Now that doesn't necessarily count because that wasn't gun related. So let me rewind that example. All right, we'll go to the white boy who shoots up the spot and they go and give him Burger King. You feel what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or the next one, who stormed the White House and my man is getting Whole Foods to his prison cell. You know what I'm saying? So I think these are different issues that I try not to pile into the same box and
Mm.
taking into consideration. Um,
Yeah, because I mean that's like deeper than the Second Amendment. That's
it's race
systemic.
based,
Yeah.
it's capitalism, sexism. I mean, there's layers to this, man. And I think the scapegoat is just a gun. It's like, all right, well, let's just go for the gun because that's a universal issue that everybody can jump on board. But we'll never
Mm.
talk about race and class,
That's super
and damn
powerful.
sure and damn sure not privilege.
What can you give us a little bit of insight? Like I can say, as someone who took your class, it was literally nothing that I was expecting it to be. But I sought out the class because I wanted to have a black owned business and teacher and get that perspective. Because that's
Mm-hmm.
my perspective, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember coming back from the class and I couldn't even like I was trying to explain it to my mom because I wanted her to do it, and she's kind of like definitely democratic anti-guns, and I couldn't even explain to her like the education that I received. I was like, it's the class is so much deeper than like the basic safety and laws, like in what I learned. So
Mm-hmm.
can you give us a little bit of insight into what you teach in your class and the format and why it's so unique and different from other classes that are out there?
I mean, for me, like I said, I was a public school teacher for 16 years. And I did a lot of work around young men's rite of passage. And one of the things that I'm very kind of serious about is healing, right? Um, and it's hard explaining to people like a firearm is a healing modality. And here's the reason why. When you get a firearm, you're held to such a higher standard that popping off in the club, that running your mouth and talking trash, it has higher penalties when you have that firearm on your waistline. So what I try to teach to my students is like, look, there are cultural elements of owning a firearm that we just got to change. Like, for example, we can't be popping trunks on nobody. That's gotta stop, right?
Can you explain what that
We
means? I
can,
don't think the listeners know what popping a trunk
Our
means.
listeners definitely do not.
listen, like it's like for example, a lot of times when folks wait, are you being serious or are you messing with
No, we're
No,
being
being
dead
dead
serious.
serious.
oh, okay. Yeah, like now I gotta ask sometimes. Like, yo, a lot of times people will put a firearm in their trunk, right? Because culturally that's what rap music says. That's what Boys in the Hood tells us. Menace to society and all of these other elements that
Classics.
we see and hear. So we emulate them, and in the state of Massachusetts, because as a responsible gun owner, you have a duty to retreat. The moment you leave a situation, grab a firearm and go to use it, it's actually considered premeditated murder, even if it's in self-defense. So like these cats know our culture, they've studied us, and they're using it against us. So we have to, remain abreast to like the laws and how they pertain to us and how they're used against us. So that's one of the things that I have to teach in my class.
That concept of how did you say it? Firearms are a healing modality.
Hmm.
That is just something I have never heard of before, but after taking the class, it makes sense, and I just appreciated like the knowledge of not just how to be safe with a gun, but like what that means for me as a black person, and well, like you said, how that actually how having your license actually brings you to a higher standard that you have to hold yourself to than not having it. Like I like the way you put that.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on it earlier about what would happen if you got pulled over with a gun. I remember when Asia came back from your class, she mentioned that you stated, like, if you're black with a license and you get pulled over, the cops automatically look at you differently as, like, not a thug because you went through all the parameters to go through and get your license legally. Does that
I
make
didn't say they didn't think you were a thug, but I was
you said something like that? Does that sound
I
familiar?
said
No,
it's
but
advantageous. It's advantageous.
it is, and I would definitely agree. I think,
You said
if an
thug.
officer rolls up to your window and sees that you have a license to carry, as you're saying, Jared, the positive assumption is that you had to have gone through the legal way to get a firearm, which means that you are not a criminal, you do not have a record, or otherwise you could not get the car. That's beneficial.
Yeah. Criminal, that's what you said, not thug. You're right.
I said criminal because
Yeah,
he
you did
might
say
still think you're
criminal.
a thug. I didn't say all that.
But no, yeah, because
Right.
I mean, I first got my license in Connecticut, and then I moved up to
Hmm.
Mass, and then I got it in Mass, and every time that I have it on me and I'm driving, I'm like, I always think about what could happen if I got pulled over and how I would need to react so I could make it out of that situation. So I was definitely interested in hearing like what you said or what you taught in your class and what she told me when she got back to your class, because I think that's a very important situation that somebody needs to learn.
I mean, and I think, and that's the hard part, right? Because what do you have to do? You have to have a finger on your traumas, right? And as a black man in America, if an officer rolls up to the window, that's not the time for you to start acting crazy. You understand? So you have to be able to identify you're being triggered and be able to resolve that trigger within yourself as the event is occurring and be cool because you're legit.
Yeah.
And I'll say this because I don't want to sound crazy, but if the interaction goes sideways, you also want to have the one up. So I just leave it at that because
Um,
it can as well.
you also talked in class about, so you also teach classes for children, and you talked about the impact on just the generational knowledge that it is our duty as black people to pass down to our children so they can be safe. So yeah, can you just talk a little bit about that and like at what age you started talking to your kids about it and the safety around gun ownership?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the conversation didn't happen until about two and a half, but I started the process at about one. And basically, I would leave a training firearm um, at her in her bedroom. It's just a firearm that is red, and when you manipulate the trigger, it sends a red dot on the wall. It's called a SIRT pistol. And ultimately, I had all these kung fu flick X ideas about how it was gonna go down. I was like, thinking in my mind, I'd put a Barbie doll in the gun and say, "Today you've got to choose, my child." you know, and it took about a year for her actually to touch it. What I don't want to happen is, particularly with my own children, is for them to grow a fear around firearms because I traumatized them. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So I want them to respect it and take it seriously, but I don't want to be screaming at my children, for their a natural curiosity, right? Especially when they're going to birthday parties and in their gift bags, other parents are giving them cap guns and water guns and stuff like that. then we need to treat these things as the same, so that way
Mm,
they grow up in a positive, with a positive relationship to firearms.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important too. Like if you're in the household with them, you should know at least the basics of it. So like my wife, or when I first got my license, I don't think we were married yet, but she was totally against it. But I was like, I'm going to this class. You definitely should come with me, just so you can understand it and you know how to use it because it's going to be in the household. Like I know you're scared of it. I know you don't like it, but you still should be able to handle it. Worst comes to worst, if I'm not around and if something ever happens, like you know how to use it. You feel comfortable with it. But how do you feel about for individuals who have a significant other who are going to be in the house with weapons, but they necessarily don't want to go to a class or touch them or be comfortable with them at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about this all the time, it's definitely a lot of times men, who have wives are a little bit afraid, but sisters are starting to make the demands as well. So I've had a bunch of sisters that have come through that are like, listen, hey, bro, you need to get your stuff together,
Mm,
So I think it could work either way. But what I will say to that is like, I think it's important to respect where the person is at. Um, but at the same time, you have to use scenarios um, to be able to explain to them why it's important. So, case in point, um, my wife and I have been taking all of the introductory courses. We had took all the introductory courses together. So we took home defense, the mass home farm safety. We took concealed carry together, right? But she didn't want to buy a gun, and she definitely didn't want to carry. So when my oldest daughter was born, she was about 6 months. My neighbor had opened his door, and he had two pit bulls run out of the house. Now, because we had already established home defense plan, right, which was fairly basic, my job is to go directly to the threat. Her job is to protect the children, plain and simple, right? Um, so in this particular situation, we operated and moved our plan, and it was executed well. And where most people would have been, hysterical, crying, you know, crazy, like me and my wife were like high fiving each other. We was like, "Yo, good shit!" Like, "Yo, we did that really fast,"
mm-hmm.
because I was literally taking my daughter out of the car seat when the dogs came running out the door. So I had to hold my daughter like this, do a one-handed draw, cock the gun, and get the gun presented on the dog before it could get to us to try to bite us. And while I was doing the one-handed draw, my wife had literally pulled my daughter and had ran to the other side of the car. Um, so it was like, I mean, it seemed like 50 minutes, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? But like that 5 to 10 seconds, had we not had a plan, could have went horribly wrong,
Mm-hmm.
we've left clubs where people were shooting at the club. We mo I tell this story in my class too. We had another couple that was with us that did not have a plan, and one went this way and the other went that way, and they're screaming at each other, in the middle of the shootout, babe, get down. I'm scared, honey, I'm scared. And they're and
No.
the gangsters is out there like and it's like they ran in opposite directions. It's like, so I always say to people, I pray that nothing ever happens for the other spouse to realize why it's important. But I think if you respect where the person is at and use situations and scenarios as an opportunity to have a conversation, then the other person will come along. So I mean, I'm a firearms instructor for all these years, and my wife just started carrying this year. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Well, also, I was going to ask you about the carrying part because something that I remember going through the whole class, right? And the longer we went through class, I was feeling like more educated, like more empowered every hour that went by. And then something that really stuck with me at the end is, there's a difference between like having your license to carry and then like actually carrying on you like
mhm.
24/7. And just the fact that it's not like a switch like that. It's not like it takes time and education. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think even the thought of carrying is like a scary thought to a lot of people who are especially uneducated. So
And
yeah.
before you go, like,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel comfortable. I have my license in 2 states, but it might sound crazy to you, but even when I carry, I don't carry it and it's not loaded. Like I have the mag, I have the mag loaded, but it's not in. You know
He
what I
needs
mean?
class, right?
It's because I don't feel 100% comfortable yet.
Oh
So
my
if
God.
it was like, what's the point of having it, right?
Jesus
Which
Christ.
class should he
Well,
sign up for?
I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you, Jared. I'm not gonna shame you in no way. In that dog situation, and this is real talk. In that dog situation, um, part of the reason why I carry with one in the chamber now is because in that moment I had to draw my firearm
Hmm.
and cock the gun with one hand because my daughter was still in my hand, and at that time I did not carry with one in the chamber because I had this pretty little girl always beneath my knees, and
Yeah.
my brain is like, oh my God, what if the duppy man come and pull the trigger and make the gun go off? You know what I'm saying? Like, and then once you realize the science is like, listen, as long as my finger or nothing touch the trigger, the firearm's not going to go off. But that, as Asia is saying, that does take time, and training and practice. So I definitely won't shame you for that because, it wasn't until my oldest daughter was born that I started carrying one in the chamber. And to your question, Asia, I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, the same way you leave your house with your wallet, the same way you leave your house, hell, with your drawers on, right? You wear it not because it's necessary. You wear it because it's practical and it works, right? As someone who has had guns pulled out on me at times where I was the safest, right? Safest. I truly know and understand that we don't get to pick when evil decides to overcome us or try to take us. Our job as good people is just to be more trained to beat them to the punch. I've had too many women in my classes who are like, yo, these Uber drivers are creeps, right? And like one sister in particular who was in my very first class, like, and I've grown to like have a really close relationship with her. She was like, yo, I ended up having to mace this Uber driver, get out, fight the Uber driver, stab him, only to end up in court where he tried to press charges against her.
Mm.
You get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, like, there's some really sick, perverted individuals that are out there, and it's important. If I'd even go a little bit further and say it is critical and essential that good people understand that we want to live our lives peacefully, but it's important for good people to be more trained than those that are intended to inflict evil. Otherwise, the story ends up differently.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, I think we can end on this. Do you, certain stigmas or misconceptions about weapons, do you touch on that in your class?
Not necessarily. I think folks come in already with those stigmas, so I don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on them. So comfortability is critical. I think because of the stigmas and the focus on all of the negative aspects of a firearm, I think people come in with a level of nervousness that allows them to create these narratives in their mind that aren't necessarily true. And hell, I mean, just to use you as an example, and myself included, right? I mean, even gun owners still have stigmas about guns, right?
Hmm.
Hence why we both, may not put around in the chamber. You know what I'm saying? So these are all things that come with the inherent risk associated with firearms, and that's okay. I'm okay with those stigmas. I'm okay with um, uh, folks spending time evaluating all of the negative aspects. What I'm asking people is just don't close the door completely. You
Mm.
know, come through, explore this the same way you would go bungee jumping, right? The same way you would go skydiving. You know what I'm saying? And explore this as a possibility. What I don't like is when people try to stigmatize folks like myself as inherently evil because I carry a firearm.
Right.
It's like, nah,
Yeah,
yo,
that's
I'm a
totally wrong.
father to two beautiful little girls, two beautiful Black girls at that, right? And the reality and the fact is that perverts are kidnapping Black girls. Period.
Right.
And my primary responsibility as a father to those little girls is to ensure that they feel protected at all times. And yeah, these hands is nice, but I may not be able to ward off two or three guys, especially holding hands with two little girls.
Mm-hmm.
So the first guy is going to catch a couple to the dome with these hands, and the next two is going to catch a couple of rounds to their pelvic. And lo siento, pero tú tienes que será, because I gotta do what I gotta do, papi. Okay, and I'm going to leave it at that. All right, but nah. Honestly though, I just want people to come out and explore it. I really believe that um, part of what will, and this is a weird kind of like thing. I don't know. I don't know if I'm being an idealist, but I think that if more Black people were armed, they wouldn't give a shit about racism so much, right? The only reason why I think a lot of
The fear.
folks remain fearful,
Yeah.
yes, of racism is because they ain't strapped up. So they got all of these ideas. Oh my God, old Timmy over there in Brookline, he's got automatic Uzis. It's like, okay, you could have used your stimulus check to buy one yourself had you taken the class.
Right.
You feel me? Like I'm just saying, like we all got options and possibilities. By no means am I saying we go to Brookline and bomb on them, but if they did what they did, what was it, 4 years ago when the Ku Klux Klansmen and all the alt-rights came through downtown Boston, right? I don't know if y'all remember that.
No,
But
I
like they
don't remember
literally,
that. I actually wasn't
yeah,
living in Boston 4 years ago, so I probably had no idea.
that's what. All right, so Pete, so literally the Klan literally walked through downtown Boston. They had a whole rally where they marched through downtown Boston. And everybody, at that time was like, oh my God, we're so scared. The Klan is coming to town. And I was like, okay.
They're
I was
not gonna
like,
come to
here's
this
my
store.
address.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, come through the Roxbury. I'll be on the roof. Don't worry.
I'm not even gonna. I'm
I'll
not even gonna
greet you.
hold you. I'll be saying the same thing. I'm
Like,
strapped and loaded. I'm like, come this way.
I'm like, please do. We'll have a great conversation and dialogue about race and racism in this country. I mean, it's the great equalizer. You know
Yeah,
what I
it's
mean?
so crazy because I'm having like my mind is like going in circles, like just processing the same way that I was when I left class that day. All day I was like, wow, I never thought like for the rest of the day, and I just feel like that even just the knowledge alone is so empowering. But the idea that, and this is why I was so like just enlightened and blown away by it, because prior to your class, I had never considered the idea of what you're talking about in the sense of how gun control specifically would be hurtful to our community the most of any other
Mm-hmm.
community. And I just think it's such an important perspective for people to hear. And I think what I'm getting from all of this, which I think is your point, is like at the end of the day, it's not the Second Amendment or like our gun laws or whatever that need to be fixed. Really, it's like the inherent racism foundation of our country. And
Mm-hmm.
if that is fixed, then we all can be empowered to, be
Be better.
be better and be gun owners and not have these issues that our country has. I guess I don't know. It's like it's a lot to.
Until those things are fixed, I mean, chitty chitty bang bang. I mean, that's just gotta be what it's gotta be. I just don't leave home without it because I've just seen too much and lived through too much. And I think my favorite meme on Instagram is, I'm not my ancestors, who was gonna just let you punch or slap me in the face.
Yeah.
Like
You're getting something
I
back.
think that we
Hmm.
we've ex- yeah, you exactly. And I think even just saying that sometimes is even scary for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my God, that's not the way. And it's like, okay, but I'm a father now. So
Right.
you're not gonna do it to me, nor are you gonna do it to my children. So, but that's a whole nother subject. What I know Jared said that that was the last question, but here's really what I really try to push in my class as well as in other situations where we have conversations around the Second Amendment. For Black and Latino people in America, the truth is we have mad work to do around this little piece of polymer and steel. And the biggest part of that work is it has to be done within us, right? There are pieces and elements in our culture that we have to address. There are pieces and elements within ourselves and our own traumas that we need to address before we can even talk about enemies outside of our homes and our communities. So part of why I encourage people to get a firearms license is to begin the healing journey for themselves. Because the truth is, when you have a tool that can take lives, it forces you to examine what are the other options that you have. Peaceful options. How do I live peacefully? Because I got this thing and it'll do some damage. And if you've seen me shoot before, you know I'm not going to miss. So the question becomes, then what peaceful options do I want to exhaust first? And that part is what I think having these tools can be hugely beneficial to the Black and Latino community. Because now we can have a deeper conversation like, yo, I don't want to shoot nobody that looks like me. I don't want to harm nobody that looks like me.
Right.
So how do I recognize these triggers within myself that are going to allow me space and opportunity to examine my triggers and be able to provide sustainable practices that allow me to correct them for myself and not have to allow somebody outside of me to correct my behaviors. And that's what my hope is. And that's why I call responsible to a lifestyle a healing modality, because my prayer and my hope is that people continue to live peacefully, but understand that there is evil out there. But let's just train harder and get to the line first before they get to us. So
Facts. So where can everybody find you on Instagram, your website? How can they drop all your stuff?
Yo, you can find me on Instagram, the Don Firearms. That's THEDON Firearms, FIREARMS. I have a Facebook page, but if you haven't been peeping, Facebook has literally been silencing the Second Amendment. So anytime I post anything on Facebook, I ain't gonna say 9 times out of 10. I'll say 6.5 times out of 10 they'll take it down.
That's
so
crazy.
I don't use Facebook as much. No, it is. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about First Amendment rights.
Right.
The website is www.thedonfirearms.com. You heard that, Jared?
Yep.
www.thedonfirearms.com, fans. All right.
I'll sign up for a class. You'll see me soon.
You'll see us back soon for sure.
Yes. Click the calendar and check out our dates from now all the way through August. I do have a question for y'all, though.
Great. We love questions. No one ever asks us anything.
Yo. I'm just trying to figure out how y'all got this bomb ass podcast and you got my man sitting in grandma's chair like that. Like
that's like, actually my grandma's
my butt's numb right now.
I had one of them Jones. Literally had one of those, yo. When me and my wife got our first apartment. So I'm just trying to figure out why you couldn't get the little $20.
There's another chair right there,
John.
Yeah, I gotta try another one after because my butt's numb right now.
He picked this chair. There's another chair right there. Oh my god, that's hilarious because that's actually my grandma's chair.
That's hilarious.
Jared, she couldn't even give you the little cushion, John, on there, bro. That's greasy, man.
I know.
That's why her husband don't want to be on the show. And she be doing all the little co-hosts grimy, bruh. Grimy.
There's a cushioned chair right there that he could have grabbed. He's been here before. He knows it. But yeah, no, this has been really fun and enlightening. I think our listeners will love it as well. It's a different perspective that I know they've never heard before. So I'm excited. And yeah, we appreciate your time.
Definitely.
All right. That is all we have from the interview. That was like one of my favorites, even though I feel like it's going to be controversial.
It might be, but who cares?
Who cares? This is our podcast and we're done with adulting. So anyways, if you like this episode, and this podcast, please give us a rating or a review. It goes such a long way, and we love seeing what you guys have to say.
Yeah, hit us on Instagram, Done With Adulting Pod. Also Twitter, Done WTH Adulting. Hit us up, share something, comment. We appreciate y'all.
You know what to do.